unmarked grave, dumped into a hole in Maypen. What kind of country have we become? I've never heard of this. This is what used to happen under Pinochet in Chile. It happens in Africa. It happens in Latin America. It does not happen here. I don't understand it, and I've never known the Labour Party to adopt an approach and policy like this.
What have you been told by those who have been able to communicate with you in terms of their own understanding in terms of the number of deaths?
My source may be different from theirs, but my source is an on-the-ground source. And right in Tivoli, from the community center to industrial terrace, 100-odd people were killed, just in that section alone. The rest of Tivoli is not as active an area, was not as active an area, and I would say perhaps another 30. Denham Town is not counted in that, and that's perhaps another 30 or 40, I don't know. I can only judge by the number of calls that came into me saying that they're shooting people and so on. But I would not be surprised if the total number of deaths do not range between 125 and 150. If you can account for them, because they're busy hiding the bodies by throwing them into holes.
All things considered, was the incursion necessary in the first place?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And that's the unforgivable thing about it. The Prime Minister ought not to have interfered with the service of the warrant, ought not to have interfered. That led to coke rejection of it, and that led to the need to go and get coke, and that led to the calling of the state of emergency and the sending of troops down there and all the atrocities that are taking place. These things were all unnecessary. He committed one of the biggest blunders in recent Jamaican history in taking that position.
Well, Prime Minister Golding, in defending the action in Parliament, explaining why the man at Phelps route was taken, he referenced you and an attempt to discredit you in the 1980s and the pushback against that as something of a precedence for the action taken in this regard.
In what respect?
Using the law firm, the lobbyists, to lobby to somehow going through the party to see whether the situation could be ameliorated.
My friend, we all use lobbyists. That's what they're there for. It's a standard practice. Sometimes if you know people well enough, you can get the assistance, the clarification, the help that you need without having to go through a lobbyist. The government chose to go through the lobbyists. The fact that we had a lobbyist at one time was for general purposes, CBI and things like that, not for this wickedness. So you can't use the precedence that was there for a lobby on hand, retained in case we need to have a lobbyist to find out certain things and to clarify certain things. That's an entirely different thing.
Do you agree with those who say that this has been a failure of moral leadership on the part of the Prime Minister?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I have never known a Prime Minister to display such a lack of moral rectitude.
In that case, would it be justified then that he should resign?
Quite frankly, that is my view. That is my view, because he's showing day by day that he cannot cope. My understanding is that he is trying to get the military to back off. The Prime Minister of Jamaica, who in the law is the final word and the final authority on the actions of the military, is trying to get them to back off. So if he can't get them to back off, who is the higher authority? The military? We are then a military government.
The government remains mum on claims made by U.S. news network ABC about a possible deal being brokered for the surrender of Christopher Duduscoke. In a story published today, the network said U.S. law enforcement officials have put Air Wing pilots from the Drug Enforcement Agency on alert, pending the outcome of negotiations between the alleged drug lord and the U.S. government. Janice Budd reports.
And we'll come back to that story later on. The security forces have eased some of the restrictions imposed on West Kingston residents. In a press release this afternoon, the Jamaica Constabulary Force said residents are now being allowed to move around in the community. However, the JCF is reminding residents that there is still serious concerns about safety and security as criminals continue to fire at the security forces. Residents are also urged to follow the advice given on what sections of the community they are allowed to visit so as to avoid coming into contact with potentially dangerous barricades and strange objects. Parents are being asked not to allow children to move about unsupervised. In the event of any explosions, the people are advised to go indoors.
Human rights group Jamaicans for Justice, JFJ, said it's deeply concerned at the rising number of casualties and persons detained resulting from the operations of the security forces in Tivoli Gardens and the wider corporate area. In a release this morning, the human rights group stated that some of the reports of the circumstances of the deaths are horrifying and, if true, constitute a fundamental breach of the law by those sworn to uphold it. JFJ is calling on the security forces to exercise the greatest possible respect for the lives and rights of all persons, consistent with the discharge of their duties. The group also said all residents who are caught in security force operations and are in situations of lockdown must be afforded access to food, water, medical attention, and other supplies. The group also said treatment of casualties must recognize the right to medical attention and the human dignity of the deceased.
There remained a shortage of medical staff at the Kingston Public Hospital today. Yesterday, Health Minister Ruddy Spencer announced that only half the medical team showed up for work. Today, checks with the hospital revealed that about 70% reported for duty. Meanwhile, Mr. Spencer and other members of the Health Ministry toured the hospitals today. Only the Jamaica Information Service was invited. During the government agency's interview, Mr. Spencer thanked the members of staff for their hard work throughout the crisis.
Jamaica owe these people at Victoria Jubilee, Kingston Public Hospital, a debt of gratitude. They were the saving grace in all this. They have been more than professional, and it just shows that despite all the many problems we have, the staff can come together when it's important. And I just want to express my profound gratitude and thanks to the staff.
Meanwhile, Director of Emergency Services in the Ministry, Marion Bullock-Ducasse, told the GIS that plans are being put in place to help members of the public who cannot make it to the hospital because of the volatile situation in parts of the city.
For those in the primary care setting with their chronic diseases, we have had 9 health centres open in Kingston and St. Andrew. And as the situation is improving, more health centres will also be open. We're also putting together teams that will go into affected communities that will serve the people there. So those are our immediate plans.
3 miles has been transferred